Hey everyone and welcome to another Warframe update. Call of the Tempestari dropped a couple of days ago and it brought with it a brand new Warframe, which is Sevagoth. So what does our new shadow frame bring to the table? The frame itself comes in two parts, both with different stats, abilities and even modding. So I will try and keep the info as brief and as concise as I can so the video doesn't waffle on for 15 minutes. So let's take a look at the stats. The actual frame itself, Sevagoth, has stats that are just meh. In fact, the only thing that stands out about the frame stats is how poor the actual sprint speed is, making it feel very slow to actually run around with. The Shadow, however, does have a couple of very standout stats. Health and armor are both above average, and with proper modding can be made to be incredibly tanky. Now, because the stats and the abilities between Sevagoth and his Shadow are so differently, it's worth looking at them separately. So let's start by looking at Sevagoth himself and the first three abilities. First ability sends out the Shadow, and anything that it touches gets marked for death. They all get a debuff applied to them that makes them more vulnerable to damage. Any enemies that are affected by this ability and are killed add to the death well to help charge the 4. This is definitely and seems to be the easiest and quickest way to charge the 4. Second ability debuffs enemies in an area, dealing damage over time based on a percentage of the health of the enemies affected by the debuff. In my opinion, it's not a great ability unless you start messing around with large range, strength, raw and viral to push the AoE damage. It is a legit build, but highly specific and highly situational. Probably the one that's easiest to helmet, and actually honestly was the one I replaced with Elemental Ward for a bit more survivability. The 3 is amazing, and honestly the focus of my non-shadow build. It puts out an area of effect around Sevagoth, slowing enemies and slowly draining them and adding to your death well. Any attack by Sevagoth or his allies within the Gloom ability has innate lifesteal, which is absolutely brilliant. It gives Sevagoth a slow that you can push up to 95% through modding, and the range up past 30 meters easily, and applying that health steal to everybody inside your area. This ability, quite simply, is absolutely brilliant. It's also the ability you can pull off through helmeting, so expect some utterly busted builds on some other frames coming soon. So that brings us to the build for this part of the frame. Triple Umbral with a bit of rainbow build really. We're trying to push strength as high as possible here without negatively impacting something we actually need. That's why there are weird mods on here like energy conversion. We had to fully downrank the steel fiber to fit everything without actually a double Umbral former, which is kind of unfortunate and a little bit annoying. This build, it does take a little bit of setup. You need the growing power and the energy conversion active to get as much strength as possible, and you get like a 94% slow, like 94.5% or something like that. However, once it's active, if you can maintain it, the enemies move so slowly they may as well have the AI disabled completely. It's such a good feeling build and damn good support. I put on Elemental Ward, as I mentioned earlier, for a bit more survivability. However, you can switch it for Toxin 2 if you want really snappy feeling weapons. It is very, very nice to have on some of your weapons. But the best part of the build is that you have the Shadow in your back pocket, basically an incredibly tanky and very powerful melee spectre with its own special set of skills. Now, the first ability is simple. It pulls enemies into a pile in front of the spectre. Second ability, I told you the first one was simple. Second ability, also very simple. Shadow dashes through enemies dealing damage to them. The Shadows 2 is the main part of Sevagoth's passive as well, which that if he dies, the Shadow spawns and can bring Sevagoth back by hitting enemies with this ability. I've not quite figured out the ins and outs of this passive just yet, only that it seems to be 5 enemies you need to hit. It's either hit or kill with Shadows 2 to bring him back. The 3 is another simple one. It hits enemies in an area of effect. Any enemy that is affected by the 3 is more vulnerable to damage. Nice simple debuff here. And finally, recasting your 4 will heal Sevagoth based on the amount of time that the two of them are apart. Modding the Shadow is kind of uninteresting, to be perfectly honest with you. It's tanky with range. The range is to boost the first ability because it's amazing. The other abilities are kind of strong enough that they don't really need much boosting through mods, quite frankly. But hugely boosting that range that he brings enemies to his feet to kill them is absolutely worthwhile. The only thing that might raise eyebrows is Swift Momentum, which is on there to boost the wind-up speed of the heavy attack, which is actually what we're going to focus our claws on. Now, the claws are a standard heavy attacking build, nothing particularly amazing or special going on here. I went with the heavy attacks here because honestly, as a light attacker, it's hard to justify using over a Blood Rush melee in the standard frame with the slow. Combining one, though, with the heavy attack is a potent combo, as you can see in the footage in the background. One thing to note, though, is that you have two types of heavy attack. Either you can use a heavy attack followed by another heavy attack, which does a spin in the second heavy, or if you block while heavy attacking, it will only ever do the first style of heavy attack. So what do I think of Sevagoth? Well, honestly, I like him quite a bit. I find him to be a very capable support character, with that sort of large area effect slow and the giving of lifesteal to everyone inside your area, combined with an incredibly tanky, heavy hitting mode that can make mincemeat out of anything that you try and take him up against. Now, fair warning, I did have to do a bit of creativity to try and help with the energy drain in Sevagoth mode, like using Death Cube, which normally incredibly squishy, right? But since the slow takes the vast majority of the fire off of you, it lasts far, far longer than it would do normally. He's not a particularly difficult frame to get a hang of, despite him looking quite intimidating at first with two sets of powers and things. He's definitely no Equinox, and there are other builds out there that can be built for. Like I mentioned earlier, high strength raw plus viral can turn his 2 into a massive nuke, but it's so highly situational, I decided not to build for it. It's certainly a legit build, and I'm sure you'll see some videos of people using it in the simulacrum in the coming days. Aside from that, the quest to unlock the ability to farm him was short, but it was pretty enjoyable. Well, as long as the Void Storm didn't decide to burn out your retina, and that sea shanty song was absolutely epic. The lore was solid too. I would love to hear more about the events mentioned in the quest, but I guess we'll see what happens with that. Although, that's kind of pretty much it for stuff to cover for this update. I'll attempt to play around with some builds for some other frames, based on the Helmet Thing of Gloom, Sevagoth 3, and try and come up with some videos for you all soon. But for now, hope you have a fantastic day. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and I shall catch you in the next one.